Many people may not have noticed that an industry often seen as old is quietly returning to the center of discussion, and that is coal chemicals. In the past, when we talked about coal, it was mostly in the context of power generation or steel production, very traditional uses. But now the logic of the conversation has changed. Coal is being reconsidered within a much larger framework, that of energy security. And this shift really starts with oil. For decades, the global energy system has been built around oil, and China's position within that system has one defining feature: a relatively high dependence on import. When international markets fluctuate, whether due to price volatility or disruptions in transportation routes, the entire system comes under pressure. In recent years, this uncertainty has become more visible. Against this backdrop, a fundamental question has resurfaced. If external supply becomes unstable, do we have reliable alternatives that can step in? This is where coal comes back into the picture. China's coal reserves are abundant, geographically concentrated, and supported by a mature extraction system. From the perspective of resource control, it is one of the most stable energy options available. The challenge, however, is that coal cannot directly replace oil. It has to go through a series of complex chemical processes to be transformed into liquid fuels or chemical feedstocks. That transformation process is what defines the coal chemical industry. Historically, coal chemicals never became mainstream largely because of technical and economic constraints. Conversion efficiency was relatively low, and pollution was a serious issue. As a result, it was often treated as a backup option rather than a primary pathway. But this situation has been gradually changing. With advances in technology, coal can now be gasified into synthesis gas, which can then be converted into methanol, olefins, and even synthetic fuel. This entire chain has become increasingly mature. At the same time, domestic manufacturing of key equipment has improved significantly, enhancing both cost control and supply security. In other words, coal is no longer just a fuel. It is becoming a foundational raw material that can integrate into the broader chemical industry. From a strategic standpoint, the significance of this shift lies in the buffer it provides. Coal chemicals are not meant to fully replace oil. That would not be realistic in terms of efficiency or economics. But in extreme scenarios, they can act as a safety net, ensuring that basic energy and chemical supply chains remain intact. This kind of capability, not optimal but essential, is a core component of energy security. Of course, the challenges are equally real. Coal chemicals have never been an easy path. The first issue is water consumption. Many coal chemical projects are located in northwestern regions, where water resources are already scarce. Large-scale development inevitably puts pressure on local water systems. The current approach is to improve recycling efficiency, using advanced treatment systems to reuse as much water as possible. Some projects are even approaching near-zero liquid discharge, but this comes with higher investment costs and greater operational complexity. The second issue is carbon emissions, which is also the most debated aspect. Coal is inherently carbon-intensive, and even after conversion, its overall carbon footprint remains significant. However, from a technical perspective, coal chemical processes actually have certain advantages when it comes to carbon capture. They produce relatively concentrated streams of carbon dioxide, making it easier to capture and utilize or store. Applications such as using captured CO2 as a chemical input, or for geological storage, are already being tested in pilot projects, although large-scale commercialization still requires time. Then there is the regional dimension. Areas like Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang, with their abundant coal resources and available land, naturally become focal points for coal chemical development. For these regions, it is not just about energy production, but also about industrial upgrade. It offers a pathway to move beyond simple resource extraction toward more diversified economic structure. At the same time, this development must be carefully balanced with ecological capacity, infrastructure readiness, and long-term market demand. It cannot be driven solely by resource availability. In the end, coal chemicals are fundamentally about trade-offs. They are not a perfect solution, but under certain conditions, they represent a viable option. In an era of increasing energy uncertainty, relying on a single resource is itself a risk. Coal chemicals provide an additional layer of resilience. That said, this path requires continuous technological progress and a careful balance between environmental impact and efficiency. Whether it will eventually become a true pillar depends on two key variables. One is the level of uncertainty in the external environment, and the other is how far technology can push down costs and emissions. If both conditions evolve in its favor, the role of coal chemicals may continue to rise. But if external conditions stabilize or alternative energy sources accelerate their transition, it may remain a strategic backup rather than a dominant solution. So rather than thinking of it as the answer, it is perhaps better understood as a card in reserve. It may not always be played, but it needs to be there when it matters.